So I'm sure many of you are familiar with that FDR speech after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, when he said, December 5th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy. Well, I got to say that November 4th, 2025 will be a day that will live in infamy in Republican circles on account of the destruction they experienced a couple of days ago. Wonderfully resounding victory, and there are so many positive messages to be gathered from this victory. Probably most important, in my opinion, is the momentum that it's building in instilling hope and belief in voters and people that we can find our way out of this mess. But I thought I would comment on a number of individuals that are critical at this juncture, though for the most part I'll leave the orange maniac out of the message and focus on the individuals that were successful and looking ahead to where they might run into good periods too, but also roadblocks. And here is where I'll start with the man of the hour, Zoran Mamdani, who, when you look at his chart, you notice one of the biggest assets that he has is that his locality chart. This is where you take the birth chart, which in his case is in a different continent, and you cast it as though he were born in New York. And that chart propels him into celebrity status and government roles. Literally, he's got that Neptune North Node position, very elevated in the New York, and living in New York, being in New York, as well as it turns out, very interestingly, it echoes the chart that a lot of astrologers use for the foundation of New York, because it has a similar feeling. I won't go too deeply into the astrology analysis here, but just to say that there are very interesting reflections there. And we also know, being Leo rising, and this is one where, according to his birth time, he's like 0 right at the very beginning of Leo. So you might wonder, well, what if he was born a minute before or two, he'd be Cancer rising? I suspect not. His demeanor, his presentation has strong Leo overtones. Now, this tells you that as he gets into whatever he's going to do, Jupiter will enter Leo next summer. And so from the summer of 26 into the following summer, it should be quite good. Jupiter has a way of enhancing your energy, protecting you, especially when it's the ascendant, because the ascendant is one of the best years in 12 every time it goes through there. So there's that. But then his problem is going to be in 27. By then, just as Jupiter is leaving the zone, Saturn will be squaring his sun. He is in the 24, 25 degree range of Libra, which means from around that time, for about a year plus, is going to be the test of his mettle in a pretty big way. The Saturn will be there, and Saturn is definitely going to challenge during that year. The advantage he has is that post that, by the time you get into the 28 zone, by then Jupiter enters Libra, which is his sign. And so that will again help him to potentially restore himself from whatever happened in the previous year, or just in general, it helps. And the icing on the cake is that I noticed that at election time, and especially at inauguration time for the federal election, then Jupiter's on the Sun, which is a wonderful position. So overall, I would say he's got pretty good odds. The other two, Spanberger, she's got a lot of Leo planets, so she should do really, really well in the period, I'm going to say between now and the summer of 27, which is, the Leo starts in the summer of 26, but there's not a lot of impediment in the near term, so she should be totally fine. And post that, it doesn't mean she loses a lot of energy either. But in the case of Cheryl in New Jersey, it's more complicated because she has planets in Capricorn, Mercury, and then the Sun later. And so for her already next year, it's challenging. Saturn is unmistakable, and already by the late spring of 2026, she runs into lots of Saturn, and it's still there through 27 for the same reason that Mamdani will also be feeling it. He's getting the square from Aries, or pardon me, the opposition to Libra, and she's getting the square. So squares, oppositions, they're challenging, right? So either way, though, beyond that point, similarly, the Saturn does move on and leaves the zone. And so, in fact, it enters Taurus. And Taurus is always going to be helpful to Capricorn by way of the fact that, in Aries it squares, but in Taurus it trines. And then the final person I'll talk about here, who I think is becoming more and more of a serious presidential candidate, is Gavin Newsom. He was very successful in the Proposition 50 initiative to counter, literally it's like the theft that they're attempting to engineer in Texas and in other places. Now, one of the results of that success is that it's almost certain to embolden other Democratic states to do the same, because they have to. They have to. And they are prefacing by saying, well, if you guys stop, we'll stop. Put down your weapons and we'll put down our weapons. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I think it's super important. Otherwise, they'll just manufacture the win. So, very good result for him. And you have to credit him with the fact that it was looking possible, but somewhat dicey when he first proposed it. But he and his team did a fabulous job of bringing the voters to vote, and they did in huge numbers in the 60s, 2-1, which is a huge result. And so I would say that he's on track to probably be a very viable, successful presidential candidate. I have said in prior videos that his chart in 2027, 2028 is really hard to beat. It is incredibly powerful. However, in the near term, like Spanberger, like Cheryl, he is facing a lot of Saturn. His period, which is going to test him, it's very hard to get around this without serious tests. And they're the kinds of tests that, yes, they can end careers. They can damage you so much that you have to do something else. It's a test. It's huge. Between approximately April, May of next year and the following April, May, meaning April, May of 26, and roughly May, say June to be safe, middle of 27 is when the energy completely shifts, because then the Saturn has moved from the fact that it returns for him next year. That already is a big thing, the Saturn return. But then it also squares his Sun in early 27. All of that is hard, including can be very hard. Then we go into the middle of 27. Jupiter is going into Virgo, which is the sign of his ascendant. Now the energy is picking up, including that it'll correlate with the election cycle, because that tends to start fairly early around declaring and so forth. So very, very useful for Jupiter to be in Virgo from the middle of 27 to the middle of 28, whereupon it enters Libra, which is his sun sign. The reason I've said he's almost a shoo-in. It's wonderful to see that Jupiter, literally on election night, is exactly conjunct his sun. So there you have it on 4 different people that at the moment are key players. In my opinion, the patterns are really, really good. Let's all hang in there and wait these people out and stay positive, because I think that this recent election signals very good things to come in the upcoming future, including, most importantly, as we move toward the elections in 2026. And the top one, of course, is the midterms in November. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. It's free and it really helps. Thank you.